the first thing that we need to remember is like, what's the company's vision? We got to fit
Mhm.
within that context as
Mhm.
designers. So what are we trying to do as a company? And design often finds itself as kind of the service center to that broader initiative, what we're trying to do as a company. Where do we fit in? And then we often break down our vision for our design team. What does design need to do to help the company reach that broader vision? And with that comes two sides that you're speaking to, right? There's the stakeholders, the leaders that you're partnered with. That's your team. You're trying to convince them how design can help them realize the company vision. But then you have to go into other meetings with just designers and help them understand how the work that they're doing translates into these company goals. So like the vision changes just like on that trip along the way. You're
Mhm.
checking in, making sure you're hearing things. But ultimately, our role, at least in most organizations I've worked in, it's about the company vision and where we're going and tying that back to the mission and what our customers want from our company. So, yeah,
And
it
do
is
you?
hard. It's really, really hard. And I would say the more, if you are sitting there thinking, oh, we talk about our vision enough, I got it. You don't.
Mhm.
Like you have to
Mhm.
reinforce it over and over and over again.
Mhm.
Because it's hard to keep that destination in mind, and it changes. Every organization is a little bit different when you join it. You can rely on some of the same thinking, but you got to adapt to who your stakeholders are, what you're trying to do. It just, I think it works really, really well to think about it in terms of like this journey that you're on and the people you're on with you. So like maybe to just take it back, I'll talk about my trip to Puerto Rico. Few years ago, the family went, and we knew we wanted to go to Puerto Rico. And as we were planning, we talked to each of the kids. What do you want to do? And I think one wanted to go snorkeling, one wanted to go into the jungle, and I think one wanted to see San Juan. And for me, my wife and I, we wanted to go paddle in the bioluminescent bays, which are amazing. If you have a chance to go to Puerto Rico, please do it. But that was like the courage to pivot part for us. Like it just kept raining at night, so we ended up missing the new moon, which the skies are the darkest. But it worked out. We went later in the week, and we still had a good trip. Everybody got to do. We were checking in along the way, like, "Hey, we went to San Juan. What did you think? The jungle was great, wasn't it? Anything you want to do? We had this for dinner." Like it's kind of the same thing you're doing when you're leading a team of designers. You're just checking in with your stakeholders. You're checking in with your designers. You're trying to get insights along the way. What's working, what's not, how do we adapt? So it's just a convenient way of thinking
Mhm.
about it. I feel like maybe it's too simplistic to boil it down this way, but I learned that when I was in my design operations role at Morningstar, and we went through several tool transitions and that sort of thing. And it really was just user research, right? Like, what is it that's important to this customer? Because they're a
Mhm.
customer of mine. I needed to influence them to
Right.
get Figma, get whatever it was that we were looking for, get Marvin. And like, how do I make their life easier? And I think as designer, you can use these same tools and tactics that are in your tool belt to get the information you need to be successful. So I just learned what the procurement process was. And as you and I were talking, I was like, okay, security is going to be really important. They're going to want an answer from you on, where are your servers around the world?
Right.
How do you
Right. Right.
protect our
Right.
data? Like all of those things you're trying to anticipate, which made me hopefully a better partner to you as well. It's like, okay, as you're putting your proposal together, I know procurement's going to want this. I know security is
Mhm.
going to want this. And it's kind of the same thing with any stakeholder that you're working with as a leader. You're trying to understand, what does marketing want? How can I help them achieve their goals? How can I align my design team to understand how this particular stakeholder ticks, what's important to
Mhm.
them, those sorts of things.
That is so great to hear, because that is, I think, a lot of times, you're, as a leader, you're responsible towards your team, but you're also responsible towards your peers. And one of the biggest challenges that a lot of our design leaders kind of, getting in front of the customers, how do I even do that? So we talked about tracking progress as part of kind of the operationalization, and when to know when you need to pivot. And you mentioned kind of OKRs. um you mentioned like NPS and SUS and
Yeah.
CSAT and all of those, but you have this really nice kind of framework that you mentioned, this kind of this layered approach on tracking progress and measuring impact of a design and research org. Let's talk a little bit about that. I thought that framework was super useful.
Yeah, the framework that I'm about to share was inspired by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I think somebody else out there kind of put this framework together too. I can't remember who. I wish I could find the source. Maybe I can send it to you later and put it in the show notes. But it really was, it came out of a conversation between Morningstar's chief design officer and I, thinking about the health of the design team, thinking about the health of the engineering team. We're kind of removed from those business metrics like revenue and customer satisfaction, all these things that like are really important to business leaders, but can seem foreign to a front-end engineer or a designer on the ground. So what can we do to put together a model that really focused on things in our control? And we pitched this as a product quality metric to tie designer and engineering performance to the things that we have more control over, the quality of the products that we're releasing. So at the bottom layer, really what it was is a foundational kind of layer. Is the application up, available? Is the data within it accurate? Is it secure, error-free? A lot of this is kind of engineering focused, to be honest, but designers have a role to play there too.
But designers have a role to play in defining what accuracy looks like, right? In this case, yeah.
Right. And, if you have information architects on your team, they can define the data structure and how relationships between them, right? Then there is the functional layer, and that's really where you can think of it as like the must-have features, the customer needs, jobs to be done, what have you. And this layer was the most contested as we pitched this and shopped it around, the 7 different business units, because every product was slightly different and they wanted different metrics here. And I'll just, say we never landed on what the right ones were, but these were things like adoption of new users, MAUs, weekly, retention, churn, whatever. We actually punted on this when we rolled it out, and we're like, it's too hard to figure out. There's too many variables, but we can still make incremental progress by focusing on the next 2 layers that are in design's control. The usable layer, which is around ease of use and efficiency. And that's where I mentioned SUS, because we're trying to get one score that we could benchmark across all of our products. Where are we? Just roughly on a quarter-over-quarter basis, where are we on the usability of our products? And that really became like the easy thing to implement. And we put in, I think it was get feedback on most of our products to track that and collect, a quarterly system usability scale score. But we also could do single use of use score, ad hoc usability testing to get that usability. Then there's like this huge chasm between like a usable product and a desirable product, right?
Right.
And we're trying to figure out, how do you measure that? Like NPS is like what's known to kind of measure this area, but it's really hard to know if you've created something that's beautiful, memorable, and worth sharing, right? So we incorporate some questions into our usability test in some products here. We also experimented with different desirability scores and surveys. Honestly, we haven't had a ton of success here, but we were committed to trying to figure out, how do you measure these things? Sometimes CSAT would be part of this. And both CSAT and NPS are really difficult because depending on what part of the business you're in, it's about the service layer, not necessarily the product only experience where design and engineering might be contributing. It might have something to do with the customer support team or how expensive something is, right? So like you're trying to figure out this balance and triangulate all of it. And then ultimately what you're trying to do is create at the top layer something that's really meaningful to that end user, not necessarily the buyer, but the end user, have personal significance. So on our individual investor team, that might be something like investor success. On our advisor-based software, that might be like they run their entire book of business on this, and it makes it really easy, and they save a lot of time using our tooling. But they couldn't imagine working with anybody but Morningstar to do reporting. And we do have these quotes that kind of reinforce, in some cases, we're just integrated into their workflow, and they couldn't think about working. And then you can tie that back to like brand and moat and like switching costs, because if they're really bought into your product, they probably don't want to shop around and find another product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I love this because it encapsulates so much of what we like, the operationalization of design and product and research. This idea of like kind of, these 5 layers. I think it's a fantastic way of thinking about the impact and measuring the impact that you're making on your org. And I think that's one of the harder things to do as you're thinking about your design org, but it's important.